Let's talk about this. A thot, a jump off, a prostitute, a freak, basically a woman who just sleep around, right? You know, we hear about that. It's very frowned upon in this society that we live in, and it should be. But we're going to talk really, we're going to go really deep about this, right? Let me start off by saying this. For one, I'm not, you know, let's get this clear. This is not me trying to judge or down talk nobody. And actually, this video going to take a turn that people don't probably see where, you know, they probably not anticipating this going to take. Because we're going to delve deeper into this, like I see, right? Look, and fellas, when I'm about to say, stay with me. Just, you know, don't throw your hands up like, oh man, here we go. Listen, if a woman is any one of them names that, you know, I just named, there's a reason why she is that way, right? Look, stay there. Look, a woman ain't just going around having sex just for the sake of going around having sex. Look, on the surface, I get it. I can see how I look like that. But look, let's talk. Let's talk. Let's start. I like to see, and I talked about it in another video I made called Real Sex and Relationship Talk. Go check that out. I might leave the link in the description. Naturally speaking, from just a pure natural point of view, not talking about how somebody was raised, not talking about if something happened to them, not talking about, you know, how they came up and all that. Look, naturally speaking, a woman needs more of a reason to go around having sex. A man needs a reason or reasons to not go around just having sex. Example, and I think this should be a great example, and it's going to lead to something else that I won't really get into in relation to thot culture, nasty women, or what have you. Let's say you got a woman that's a hooker, a prostitute. Anybody who woke up, she's willing to have sex. They ain't got to know nothing about them, ain't nothing. Just any random person who won't have sex, she'll actually be willing to have sex with them in most cases, right? Now look, the flip side of a prostitute, loose woman, nasty woman, the male equivalent would probably be a trick. Both of them are frowned upon, right? Men frowned upon tricks. They're frowned upon loose women, right? Even if the woman not doing something, not even prostitute, if she just going around sleeping around, the male equivalent to that will probably be like a simp, right? He might not necessarily be a trick. He might what people call a simp. Either way, right? But let's use the extreme examples. You got the prostitute and you got the trick. Both of these people are willing to sleep with anybody. The trick don't have to know the prostitute at all, don't have to know the woman he just met. If she willing to accept the money, he'll sleep with her, right? Any man that walk up that's willing to give the money, the prostitute will sleep with her. But look, check this out. You got two people, different genders, who's willing to sleep with pretty much anybody. And one of them still requires something. And that's the prostitute. The woman who's willing to sleep with anybody still requires you to give her something to do with. That's why I'm saying from a natural point of view, a woman needs a reason to have sex. The man, the trick, he needs more of a reason not to, because he got a woman who will go sleep with anybody who woke up. And he still got to come up off something to sleep with her. See, he needs a reason to stop him from going around just having sex. And she needs more of a reason, a legitimate reason, to go around having sex. Because look, even if a woman just sleeping around in general, right, if she's not a prostitute, right? You know, the woman, and I think we can agree, is the more emotional out of the two. The woman, when the sex act is taking place, she's the one that's actually being entered. The male is actually entering the woman, right? So look, emotionally, in order for a woman to even operate like that, something, in my opinion, it has to be off, right? On the surface, it might be obvious. On the surface, it might not be obvious. But emotionally, there's something that's off or that's being fed. Even if it's being fed in a jacked up way. Even if emotionally something's off to the point where now you will start sleeping with people for money, right? This is still an emotional act, and something emotionally is off. And what's the root of it? You know, it can vary from individual to individual. Now, fellas, let's really talk about this. Let's have a real talk about this. Two things that I just named, right? The prostitute, the trick. Like I said, fellas, and I think people in general, for the most part in society, frown upon those things. Understandably so. Not judging, I don't want nobody to think I'm trying to down talk them if you in one of them, but I'm just trying to make a point. Pimp culture ain't frowned upon, right? Why is that, right? Because look, the woman that you don't want, man, don't nobody want wife no thought, nobody who's sleeping around. Man, she's sleeping around everybody. Man, that girl a freak, that girl nasty. Ain't nobody trying to take that home. They need to stop doing it. They got all these other little girls watching. Look, and all that's true. But the person who helped create that environment anyway, for the trick and the prostitute to even meet up, he gets celebrated. The person who create the thing that you can't stand, whether it's the simp in your mind, the trick in your mind, the woman that's sleeping around, or the prostitute, the two things that you don't like, the person who created it, because it's not like it's a secret, gets celebrated. Now, how could that happen? I'll tell you how. I can tell you part of the reason why that can happen, in my opinion. This might be a hard truth for the fellas to accept, but let it sit, think about it, size it up. Like I said, sex is an emotional, male or female, sex is an emotional act. I talk about that in other videos. And like I said, for a woman to even operate like this sexually, just sleeping around, something is, throwing off emotionally, because her sex drive is attached to her emotions, just like your sex drive is attached to your emotions too, but just in different ways. Just how she can be thrown off or possibly just jacked up emotionally to do that, in order to celebrate and glorify a pimp culture, a sleep around or getting around culture as a man, you can be just as jacked up or just thrown off in some way, shape, or form in some area emotionally for you to even celebrate or glorify or partake in that culture, right? Now, on the surface, you might not be able to see it. And I can tell you part of the reason why you might not be able to see it, right? Let's talk about what is really celebrated when it comes to pimp culture, pimping, getting around, sleeping around, right? A pimp, he might have a lot of money, right? He got, even though it's twisted power and, it's perverted, he got some type of power. As men, we are natural leaders, we are natural protectors, right? That twisted power, can disguise it. It can be under the umbrella of like diamond leadership. It's just a twisted, screwed version of it. That's unproductive, that's wicked, that's twisted, right? Now look, the power, the false leadership, the money, the ability to get women. He probably can have sex with multiple women if he wants to, right? And look, the reason why pimp culture can't get celebrated like that, even though it's creating the very things that you can't stand, is because all those things that I named that can be associated with a pimp can bring momentary. See, people like to operate in just pleasure with no purpose or responsibility attached to it, right? Because in order for the pimp to get those things that you might glorify or celebrate him for, or even admire, or even want yourself, right? He still have to tamper with somebody, emotions or emotionally, to get the things that he want, right? That's why I say a pimp, or a person who celebrate, glorify, want the pimp culture, or indulge in the sleeping around culture, you can be just as jacked up emotionally as the people that you're looking at and frowning upon. Whether it's the simp or the trick, whether it's a woman that's sleeping around, or it's a woman that's just a flat out prostitute, right? Because look, on some level, you already emotionally understand something is wrong with that stuff. That's why you frown upon it. And you like emotionally detached, you'll start operating these other things that's also attached to it a certain way. And that's how you can start glorifying, celebrating pimp culture. But you'll start hating or despising the things that it creates because you see the emotional attachment to those things. But how can you recognize the emotional attachment to those things and hate that, but don't recognize the emotional detachment to the pimp culture that created it? You know why? Because you probably operating in it. You probably didn't have I'm not trying to dog you out or fuss at you, but we got to have real talk now. We're going to be real. especially man to man, right? You probably do have a emotional detachment to that stuff, because now you just operating in the pleasure of it, or what you deem the benefits of it. So the person who created the culture that you hate, you are celebrating. You know what's gonna help a man? Give that man his reason or reasons to not just go around having sex with any old body. It could be a plethora of different things, but you know what's gonna come along, you know what's gonna be attached to those different things? Responsibility. Whether it's like responsibility in general, whether it's being emotionally responsible, whether it's being secure enough within yourself and have bottom lines and boundaries to be emotionally vulnerable enough to foster like a good relationship and use sex properly, stuff like that. You're gonna have to do all that, right? But look, a lot of times, if people, like I said in dating wars, if you're not intentional about the sex drive, if you're not intentional with your romance as a man, then you don't have your reason to be responsible, right? To make sure you're not detaching the healthy emotion from these other things, right? In a healthy way. Not saying you go around being nobody doormat and don't have no boundaries emotionally. Yeah, right? That's why some men run from being sexually responsible, because it's gonna require that. But if you don't, look, I mean, world gonna be, stuff gonna be jacked up in the world if you misusing your sex. Like you hear me say in other videos, I said it again, I probably will end up saying it again because it's relevant and need to be heard.